Hi, this is Terry Francona, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on the Grueling Truth Network.
Graham here with you. Excited to have a special guest host. I told you this week Chris might not be here, and true to word, he is not, but we are really excited to have Tim Farmer with us. If you haven't been checking out the gruelingtruth.net website, you need to get on it, because why the hell haven't you been there? If you haven't been checking out our social media page on Facebook, why the hell haven't you been there? Get on it. It's Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook. But Tim has been doing a great 30 clubs in 30 days, kind of feel what you get from MLB Network, but he is writing articles every day on all of our teams, which is great because he has almost every team in the AL Central done coming into the show. So it's going to be great, Tim. I appreciate you sitting in for Chris. I finally have a co-host who might know something about baseball. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Excited to have you on the show, and Lord knows we got to talking, and we definitely aren't. We're not lacking for any AL Central news coming into the show. So let's start out west, kind of work our way a little bit more into the Midwest of the country. Jonathan Lucroy, catcher, started for the Milwaukee Brewers, obviously mainly in his career. Moved over into Texas after he probably is still kicking himself for declining the trade to Cleveland the year they went to the World Series up against the Cubbies. He now finds himself in Oakland, as on a one-year deal, $6.5 million with the A's. Another of the former All-Star players, a big name on the market that took seemingly forever to get signed. He was looking for, about $24 million, ends up being very small. And these one-year deals are definitely going to play a continuous factor in the show today, as a lot of guys are getting these little small one-year deals. Talk to us, man. I mean, it's a nice sound, a great sounding name, but it's Oakland.
It's Oakland, and it's a catcher who's been on the decline the last couple of seasons. It took a move to Colorado in the trade deadline last year for him to do anything, and it's a nice name, but it's Oakland, like you said, and it's a team that's really not going to go anywhere this year, so he may be a guy that, come July, ends up getting traded yet again.
And I think this is I love the way that you say that, because to me, this comes as more of a trade bait kind of signing. Hey, right. It's within our price range, we can afford you, and we can get a lot more back for you when somebody needs you down the road. Right. Like you mentioned, last year, hit .310 after the trade to Colorado. But again, even a guy who, not a great power guy, only 2 dingers, and he's playing in the Mile High City. I mean, it's just, he's under 100 home runs for his career. Power is not his thing. But the decline, certainly. His best year was in 2014 when he hit .301. An All-Star again in 2016. It's about it. I mean, we've heard the name. I've had a chance to see him play a couple of times. Nothing to really write home about. His WAR sits right about, at least offensively, at 1. Defensively, he's a wash to 0.1. He's not a guy who you're going to see, getting back there, catching a lot of guys. His caught stealing career percentage is 28%. Last year it was 27, so right about what you expect. It's he caught what I think it was. I'm looking at the numbers here, 20 out of 55. It's not going to be a dramatic defensive improvement, but again, I think at the end of this, if you are Oakland, a team who is perennially living in the cellar, you look at what you can get back for the name when it comes into late June and July.
Right, and he's better than Maxwell for now, but like you said, he will end up being moved in July. I am pretty sure of it.
Yeah, I mean, and a guy who, he's I think 30. Yeah, he's 31 years old. He'll be 32 in the next few months, which really goes beyond the life expectancy of a catcher. And the A's are a young ball club. We'll be talking about them here in a couple of weeks as we break down the AL West in about 3 weeks. But a lot of great young talent who is obviously overshadowed because of where they play. But Oakland is a team that before long, I think we'll start to see making some waves in the West, and Lucroy is not going to be a cornerstone piece of that future. I agree.
No, he won't.
A little bit more towards the East Coast now. We hit the Mile High cities we just mentioned. Carlos Gonzalez, a $8 million deal he signed with the Colorado Rockies, brings him back to the Rocks. Again, a right fielder. Heard the name mentioned a ton. He was trade bait for quite a bit. 32 years old. You don't think of you hear Cargo, you're, oh, okay, yeah, man, he's good stuff. You don't think 32 years old when you hear his name.
No, and it seems
long,
like he's
long in the tooth.
Right. He's been around forever. I mean, he was being talked about 10 years ago as an A's prospect.
Yep.
And
1 year with the A's, and then to Colorado in 2009, and the rest is kind of history for them. A guy who will likely have his jersey retired in Colorado. 3 All-Star appearances, 3 Gold Gloves, and 2 Silver Sluggers, plus finished third of the MVP in 2010.
Right. It's been a few years since he's been, fantasy relevant, and he's certainly an upgrade over who they were going to have in Gerardo Parra. But again, like Lucroy, another name that is name only at this point.
Yeah. Again, you like, $8 million, not nothing terrible. The tough thing for him at 32 years old, a time when a lot of guys who were kind of aiming to get that last big contract, it fell short. A 262, 339, 423 slash line last year. Only 14 home runs, his lowest in a full season in a very, very long time. The next lowest to that was in 2014. He had 11, and that was in 70 games. We saw a dramatic drop in his overall production. 57 runs batted in. Hasn't been that low since, again, that 70-game season, and then takes you all the way back to his second year in the big leagues when he had 29 RBI in 89 games. Just a marked drop-off. Career 288 hitter, though, 215 total long balls. If this is, to me, this is kind of, I don't want to say the make or break year. That sounds really over dramatic, I think. But it's one of those
close to
where,
it.
Exactly.
It's close to it.
Right. And
if it's not, because if he doesn't boost his numbers back up this year, he'll be lucky to see 1 year and $8 million again next year.
Exactly. And we're tracking exactly where I'm going. You see guys like Bryce Harper's going to be a free agent. McCutchen got moved. Adam Jones might be out there. Possibility of Charlie Blackmon as well. There's going to be a pretty good crop of free agent outfielders, rather. And yeah, if he continues to struggle, and he struggles this way in kind of the long ball capital of the big leagues. Granted, the numbers have been skewed a little bit, and they've been able to kind of tone those down with some the way they store their baseballs,
right,
keeping them temperature controlled. But if he struggles that much there, kind of similar to what we saw with Lucroy, I agree with you. I think this could be one of those things where we begin to see minor league deals with camp invites and that kind of thing, and it honestly would be a very inauspicious way to go out for a guy who had a really great run as one of the top outfielders in the game.
Right.
Speaking of top outfielders in the game, if you've heard this before, Ichiro Suzuki is old and he's still playing baseball.
He's our generation's Julio Franco at this point.
Hey, you say that name, I was still watching him play when I was a teenager, so trust me, I am still with you on the Julio Franco.
I hadn't even hit my teenage years when he started playing, so...
Granted, I have his baseball card when he was young, had the Jerry curl and the thick mustache for the Rangers. I don't have the baseball card playing for the Bravos, but hey, I remember him with the Braves, and and there's still to this day question of really how old was he really? So, Ichiro Suzuki, 44 years old, signs a 1-year deal with the Mariners. $750,000 salary with incentives, could end up being $2 million. He has a $200,000 bonus built in for reaching 150, 200, 250, 300, and 350 plate appearances. And if he makes it 400 times to the plate, he gets $250K. What I will say is that if the Mariners are in desperate need of Ichiro Suzuki to have 400 plate appearances,
their season's over.
Just go ahead and sit down in the cellar. He hasn't had. I mean, he has stayed relevant. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he has managed to, at 39, had 555. We've seen that number drop. 385, had 438 his first year in Miami, then 365 and 215. The impressive thing, though, is still he has still in his entire Major League Baseball career has yet to play fewer, or at least appear in fewer than 136 games in his career, and that was last year at 136 games. Hasn't been in the All-Star game since 2011. A guy who I think if he goes ahead and announces finally that this is going to be, hey, this is my final year, he'll make the All-Star team again. It'll be a reason for nostalgia. It'll be the proper send-off. Jeter didn't have the best year, his final year when he got the All-Star nod, but everybody knew he was going to be there. For a team like the Mariners who have, and Chris and I have mentioned this a million times, they seem content to kind of just sit in the middle. They add, the last big thing we remember is Cano and Nelson Cruz, and then Felix was supposed to kind of, gel all that together, and it never
hasn't happened.
Right, and they're still kind of resting their hat on those laurels, but, I mean, that ship sailed years ago. I mean, Felix is not even close to what he was. And Cano would never seem comfortable in Seattle.
Right, and James Paxton, a guy that they've been wanting to take that next step, always seems to get hurt.
Right. So, I certainly, I'm sure. Well, as I say, I'm sure. I mean, I guess the odd thing here is, I mean, as much as we say that, the Mariners finished what? 3 games under 500 last year, so it's one of those things that we're so used to saying, the Mariners aren't going to really be there, and they can kind of.
I mean, it's not farewell,
but
it's not that far fetched. Right, it's not that far fetched to think, hey, Minnesota went to the playoffs with 85 wins last year. It's not all that far fetched to see them pick up 7 or 8 wins and be in contention for that spot.
Exactly, and now I don't think they've made the moves. Again, we'll get to that here.
No, I don't
in
either.
A couple of weeks. But I think the issue that they're going to find is not necessarily that they are a team that I don't think they've added or lost enough to say, hey, they lost players. It's going to cost them a game. Hey, they signed this player. It's going to win them a few more games. I think the kicker is going to be that the Angels are a hell of a lot better than they were last year. The Astros are still, going to be one of, if not the best team in Major League Baseball. It's going to be more of a race, I think, for the top 2 spots. I think the Mariners may end up losing more just because, they're playing a couple of teams in that division that are just going to be that much damn better than they are.
Right.
So, you mentioned to me over the course of the last couple of weeks and turning into last week's show, which again, so appreciative of you giving love to the show and tweeting it out, guys. If you haven't checked out our stuff, be sure to go to @OOLeftField on Twitter. That's our show page, of course, Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook, and the Out of Left Field baseball community page. Season's getting ready to start. Have some fun. But also, be sure to go to, is it @View from the Mezzanine? What is your Twitter handle, Tim?
I actually have to double check that.
Oh,
I believe it's just View Mezzanine. I believe it's just View Mezzanine. @View Mezzanine.
Okay, so @View Mezzanine, check it out. Again, you're going to see all of his stuff up here on thegruelingtruth.net. Chris has been big in getting a lot of those articles up onto our page. I have started adding those as well, so you will see Tim's articles on our show page, and of course at thegruelingtruth.net, who brings thankfully brings us to you guys every week here on the show. You guys have been great with us. Show is growing exponentially, so thank you all so much for sitting with us and kind of being involved. So you mentioned throughout the week that you and I talked that you listened, you heard our kind of our debates about revenue sharing, and you had some thoughts. So I did some additional looking because I knew that you were coming on. Kind of went through what we're looking at. So I'm going to read you off the top 5 and the bottom 5 teams in 2016. Now, granted, this is a little bit older, but bear with me, it's the best I could find. In 2016, the top 5 and the bottom 5 teams in terms of revenue. Okay, so top 5. Number 1 was the Yankees, $526 million. The Dodgers at $462 million. The Red Sox, $434 million, tied with the Cubs at $434 million, and the Giants at $428 million. Your bottom 5. The least productive team financially, the Rays at $205 million, the Marlins, $206 million, the Athletics, $216 million, the Reds at $229 million, and the Brewers at $239 million. If you go up a little bit higher, surprisingly, in the middle of the pack was the Pirates at $265. So, I guess no surprise here. 3 of the 4 teams that we mentioned in, or at least the MLBPA mentioned in their grievance against teams for not spending revenue sharing are 3 of the bottom 5 teams in the Rays, the Marlins, and the Athletics. So, What are your thoughts on the Ray revenue sharing needs to be handled and what changes could happen?
Well, I don't know that there's really any changes that could be made on the MLB side. I don't think that there needs to be a salary floor like it was discussed last week, but I do believe that teams should be spending more on players, not so much on stadium enhancement or entertainment enhancement for the fans. Any team that claims that they're doing that as a team improvement, they're fooling themselves. They really are.
So then let me ask you this, because, I mean, coming from someone who lives in one of the spring training, capitals in Florida, I have seen teams leave because they're unhappy with with the way that a stadium is designed or with some of the amenities that they are granted. And we know that players can kind of be just as finicky. So I don't know that I fully agree, just because when you get a team like, say, the White Sox, who have made a ton of roster moves based on the ability to trade pieces like Adam Eaton, like Chris Sale, brought in a ton of young talent, and yet and granted they're not in this this argument here, but I don't love the idea of these teams being forced to use it on players all the time, because sometimes there aren't players out there that are worth enough for you to spend $30 or $35 million in extra money to sign, just for the sake of saying, well, we've got to do something, so I guess we might as well do it here.
Right. And, I mean, to that extent, I agree with you, which is why I agree that there shouldn't be like a salary floor that tells teams you have to spend X amount of dollars.
Right.
But they shouldn't just be, relying on guys who probably wouldn't be drafted in the Rule 5 draft to be on their major league roster.
Right.
And that's what we're going to see a lot out of, like Miami, for example, this year. Tampa Bay to an extent this year. I appreciate what Jeter did in the offseason for the Marlins because of
you're the only person
how broke
that could say that.
like how broke they are. Well, how much in debt they were, but as far as especially with the Stanton trade, he could have done a lot better as far as bringing back talent.
Undeniably, and that was our
and that's where he failed.
I mean that was with Yelich, with Ozuna. I mean that was across the board. They had done a horrific job at getting fair value back for the guys they got rid of. That has pissed me off to no end. I don't want to go into that. I'm sure the guys are tired of hearing me complain that, but I agree. What they got back was junk. They dumped salary and brought nothing back in return. At least, and Chris and I both said this: if you're gonna dump guys off, at least bring back one top prospect from the team that you're trading to. But when you bring back no top prospects from that ball club, that's just bad baseball. That's a poor job in the front office.
And the only guy they got back in any of the 3 trades they made was Brinson from Milwaukee.
Right, and
that was it.
So even then, I mean, if he's a guy who shows up enough and hits that time for that first contract, I mean, I am scared to see how long it will be before a Jeter-led Marlins team is really willing to make enough moves and splashes to try and be competitive. The scary thing is, as Harper, I think, gets ready to leave Washington, I mean, let's be honest, the East is going to be wide open. And if Harper leaves, which I think we can assume that he will, it kind of scares you because the NL East is either going to be ripe for the picking and everyone's going to be just, tripping over themselves trying to get the top spot, or it's going to be a horrible bleeping division.
I agree, although I do think Philadelphia and Atlanta are the 2 teams that have put themselves in a position this offseason coming up to make that splash signing to get them over the top.
I agree. Atlanta concerns me. I have heard that name mentioned several years now from Tom Glavine and John Smoltz. When I talked to them, they both thought that last year wouldn't be it. It would be this year or the year after. And I don't see it. Dansby Swanson hasn't done a damn thing. Granted, he's done more than Shelby Miller, who I don't know what happened there when he went to Arizona, and I feel bad for kind of the way that things happened with him. But, Dansby Swanson has been hit or miss, hot or cold. You don't know what you're going to get. Yes, you have a couple of decent pieces. I think the rotation still needs a lot of work. Tehran is there, but he is getting older. They need to build around him. What made the Braves so successful was their farm system. And granted, that is, as Chip Carey told us at the beginning when we started the show 2 years ago, the former front office management gutted that farm system trying to get veterans and the Upton brothers and and all these different guys, and it failed. So I know they're trying to put it back together. It just really, I have surprisingly more faith in the Phillies right now than I do the Braves. It's kind of hard to say.
Right. I don't disagree with you there either.
That kind of scares me. I'm not going to lie. Just so you guys know, kind of the way that revenue sharing works, and there's a lot more math that goes into it, and I have promised you all from the beginning of the show that I will not make you do math because that is just evil and unfair. But basically the idea is that every team in the majors pays about 31% of their net local revenue. That money gets divided up and equally distributed to every team. Large market teams have much greater revenues, so therefore they're putting more in and getting less back. Part of this, though, is that and it started really in 16, the 15 teams in the largest markets in baseball become disqualified from receiving revenue sharing, and we discussed that. While those teams don't get revenue sharing, they still end up being, forced into following luxury tax possibilities, and that is what's happening with the A's. As Chris mentioned last week, is that the A's are basically in their new CBA. Oakland has been kind of rezoned, if you will, as one of the upper tier markets. So that's why they are being slowly phased out of revenue sharing. And I think at the end of it, man, I mean, Tim, you're really, I think you're on point with where Chris and I were at. I mean, it's one of those things, there really is there's no easy answer to revenue
No, there's
sharing.
not.
I mean, it needs to happen, because we talk about how dynasties might be great. Oh man, look at what the Warriors are doing. That's awesome. But the problem was when the Yankees were on top, no one could really compete. So
no.
I think this is one of those things where you need to have it. Right now we're kind of just in that. I think we're kind of in that lull where we have seen over. I mean, in the 2-3 decades that I've been watching baseball, probably 2.5, age-wise, we've seen how in the late 90s to early 2000s, it was all based on the bats. Big bats, guys that could just pound the ball out of the yard. Yeah, you had some great pitchers. You had your Clemenses, you had your Pedros, you had your Glavins and your Smoltzes and your Maddocks. But for the most part, I mean, everything was based off a lot more on heavy hitters. Then it moved into arms, right? Well, if everyone can hit the ball, we got to have a surplus of arms. And you had your Lincecums come in and your Canes, and we saw this whole swath, the Beckett's and whole swath of guys. And then of course we pull steroids out, and now these pitchers become dominant, and we see perfect game after no hitter after perfect. I mean, and it was just this slew of quick kind of crazy history. And I think we're kind of getting into that lull where either they're beginning to balance out, or we're seeing the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, and we're kind of in that, okay, we're losing a little bit of this, but the other hasn't risen to met. Am I making sense of what I'm saying?
Yeah, right. I think it's starting to lean more towards the power again, coming back into play.
Exactly.
And everybody's talking about exit velocity and launch angles, and it's getting a lot more sophisticated as far as like the offensive evaluation goes.
Right, and I mean, and you mentioned it, launching. I mean, you see guys that are purposely swinging with an uppercut just because, well, uppercut's going to get the ball in the air and out of the yard. Yeah, but if you miss it, it's also going to go up the elevator shaft and then come back down and be an out. I mean, and that's
if they hit it at all.
Right,
because and that's why we're seeing record after record after strikeout record after strikeout record.
Right. And it is odd.
Baseball is becoming the true 3-outcome game now.
Yeah. It's kind of odd because, I mean, we're at that point where it's just weird where in the same year you can have a strikeout record and the most home runs hit in history in the same damn year. It shouldn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense. But it's, if you ask someone who watched baseball back in the '80s, like, wait, you mean you set the record for most strikeouts in a season and the most home runs in a season in the same year? What the hell are you guys doing? I mean, it wouldn't. A fan 30
you wouldn't
years
have thought
ago
that
would laugh
2020.
at you.
Right. I mean, 20 years ago, 110 strikeouts would lead the league. Now you're getting number 7 hitters striking out 110 times.
I mean, I remember it being discussed when Aaron Judge struck out something like, what was it, 17 times in the either the divisional or championship round, and they said, yeah, Aaron Judge is widely considered the best young hitter in baseball. I mean, and I say young in comparison to guys like Stanton and Harper. And it was, yeah, that's great. I mean, hey, he's a great hitter. If you asked Joe DiMaggio, 17 times would have been a bad season for him.
Right.
And, I think it's just, and Chris, much to his chagrin, and I agree with him to a point, as an umpire, I mean, small ball's fun. I mean, small ball makes the game go round, but small ball's not sexy. So if it's not sexy, it's not going to make, you're not going to hear the ESPN, in the background on a top play. Well, who the hell cares? Well, no. The last time I checked, when I get, ground ball in the infield, and I have Altuve or I have Derek Jeter, with a jump throw off of his right leg, almost towards third base. That's small ball. That's little stuff happening that either allows plays or moves guys around. The strategy in the game has gone away. Guys that need to be good base runners, is it really needed anymore? I mean, yeah, you need to know how to run the bases, but hell, if it's either, all right, well, I'm on first. Okay, so I've got Stanton, I've got Judge, so I'm either going to jog home or I'm going to just sit here until the next half inning. It's what you're expecting now.
Right, and I was listening to Buster Olney talk about this earlier this week on the Baseball Tonight podcast. That was one of the major topics, is you're not seeing the base stealers anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Billy Hamilton.
I mean, Whit Merrifield led the league last year and led the American League last year with 33 steals or something like that. Some ridiculously low total.
I think that'll change with the D. Gordon move. I think you'll see Gordon. I mean, Gordon has wheels, and that's the one thing. Speed never goes in a slump, right? What they always tell us. So, right. I certainly would expect to see Gordon do better. The tough thing really is the tough one really is when you get something like Billy Hamilton, who, I mean, he could run. He runs across the infield. The grass should catch on fire. But when you can't get on base, you're not any good.
Speed's useless.
Exactly. So, that's the thing. The way that Altuve played, I think Altuve is a guy that could certainly fit that bill. Being able to do both. So, I hope that we're going to be in this lull for a while. It's going to be this power thing for a while, and hopefully over time, when you begin to find out that it doesn't quite work, you kind of slide back in and you find that complement. That's why the Astros are so damn good, because you have guys like Altuve and Correa, but then you have George Springer, and you have these bats that you can do one. You have the Brian McCanns, you have one or the other, the Evan Gattises and that kind of stuff.
Right, you have guys that aren't going to strike out that much.
Right,
that can take a walk, that knows how to play small ball, but can still have guys that can put it over the fence if they have to.
Exactly. So that brings us into the AL Central. And you guys are thinking, well, that wasn't a whole lot. Well, that wasn't a whole lot because there's still a ton more for us to discuss. Just this week, actually held just today, it came out that the Minnesota Twins have taken one of the big free agent pitchers off of the market. Lance Lynn gets a, wait for it, 1-year deal.
1-year deal.
Worth $12 million. Again, this is, talk about a guy who has got to be pissed off. We saw that happen with Matt Wieters, I think, last year or the year before. We have seen this happen ad nauseum with guys in the latter part of spring training. Lance Lynn is the next one. Jake Arrieta, same way. He's getting offers, according to Scott Boras, but they're low. Doesn't want to play at those numbers. Well, eventually he's going to have to play at those numbers or not play at all. $12 million for Lance Lynn, a guy who many thought was going to get close to $50 or $60 million over the course of 4 years, gets $12 million. Now, this is great for the Twins, who have made plenty of changes throughout the season, obviously. Their second big pitcher signing, they got Jake Odorizzi, and we'll get into the breakdowns here in just a moment. But pending the physical, man, the Twins...
I like the signing.
The Twins believe they belong. And when a team begins to believe they should be there, that's when other guys should be scared.
Exactly. And they got to the playoffs last year, and they've done nothing but improve the team in the offseason.
Hasn't had a losing record in his career. Missed 2016 due to injury. We've seen 18-7 in his only All-Star year in 2012. We've seen 15-10 years. We've seen 12-11, and then last year 11-8. ERA mid threes, a 3.38 career guy. Hasn't crested 4. Came close. but hasn't crested 4. Started 33 games last year again. I mean, that's what you want to see, a guy who's a workhorse.
And that's coming off of the missing 2016. So
exactly,
he's healthy.
186 innings for St. Louis, and they were trying to make a final push in. The Brewers kind of slammed the door on him. Gave up. Now here's where the flags kind of begin to worry you. Gave up 27 home runs last year. That's almost double the most he's given up in a season. Granted, he gave up 16 in 2012, but everything else has been less than half of that. 78 walks, highest number in his career. 153 strikeouts, the lowest number in his career, save his 2011 year when he was only in 18 games. Hit 10 guys, command seems to possibly be an issue. The biggest one here, again, the lowest number we've seen, 7.5 strikeouts per 9. That's markedly below where he's been in his past. Less than 2 strikeouts per walk, again, much lower than normal. 1.3 home runs per 9, over a half home run higher. 7.3 hits per 9, that's kind of a push. And a 1.229 whip, that's actually one of the lowest ones that we've seen from him. Actually, I think it is the lowest one we've seen from him, aside from his 2011 year. So, I know, Tim, I know you've looked over the Twinkies. You know what they have, what they don't have. If Lynn can do what we've seen, I think this is a great move, and it should put the Indians, at least with the hair, should start to stand up at the back of their neck a little bit to know that this isn't going to be a walk in the park for 162 games in the Central.
Right. And I think with Irvin Santana missing the first month of the season, adding another pitcher was a must for the Twins if they were going to compete with the Indians this year. And it's a good value signing. If Lynn pitches to the way he pitched before the injury, it'll be a great signing. If not, I don't know.
If not, the beauty of it is it's $12 million for a year, and right, they're not stuck. So
right, it's a low risk, high reward situation.
Right, for both. I mean, you hate it for Lance Lynn, but if I'm the GM of the Twins, I'm thinking this is great. I've got a guy here who is, hell-bent on trying to prove that, he should be getting more than he is, so he should be fired up to work his tail off. We're trying to make another playoff push against a team who is probably going to be one of the World Series favorites out of the American League. And I'm paying him $12 million for 1 year, and he's supposed to get more than that per year for a longer term? Hell yeah! I mean, if you're the Twins, you take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Right. It's an easy signing for them. And the irony is, I had read actually yesterday that he had turned down 2 for $20, or 2-year, $20 million deal.
Now, was that from
That was from the Twins.
Really?
That he had turned down a 2-year, $20 million deal.
Makes you wonder if, and I have to think it's also one of those things, I doubt he wants to be in Minnesota. I'm not sure a ton of guys really want to go freeze up
right
there. So it might be one of those things where, maybe he's kind of betting on himself. Hey, I want 2 years, give me my 1 year, give me my 12, and I'm going to go ahead and try and get myself back on track. But you know what? I mean, at the end of the day,
if he does, he becomes one of the top pitching free agents next year.
Right, and it is. And this is that point where, you know what? It's a business. Hey, I don't really give a damn to be here, but you're going to sign me and I want to pitch. I'm going to prove I should be one of the top commodities. And I can go where I want. So, give me the contract. Let me sign it. I'm going to go out there and prove my worth. Okay. Cool. I've got a guy who's that angry. Great. And then if he can, if you got a pitcher who can come up with him and sand some edges off, make him a little bit better, and he wants to stay, even better.
Right. And when Santana gets healthy again, you're looking at 4 pitchers from Minnesota now that could almost stand up to the Indians for.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll get to in just a second. But yes, all of a sudden the Indians have a rotation that kind of makes you sit back and go, "Oh, you mean last year wasn't a fluke?" No, I don't. We all might have thought it was, and it's starting to seem like maybe Paul Molitor has a little something going on. Unlike Lance Lynn, who gets a 1-year deal in the frozen tundra in Minnesota, the Kansas City Royals only lose 1 out of the 2 free agents, or I guess really 2, 1 of the 3 if you count Lorenzo Cain. But one of the 3 big all-star names that they had on the free agent market came out. Really, the signing was today. We saw it yesterday when actually I think you and I we just talked for the first time, and it was, oh hey, by the way, did you see this? Which kind of just made us laugh. But Mike Moustakas, third baseman for the Kansas City Royals, will get a guaranteed $6.5 million contract, which has to kind of make you just go,
boy, is he kicking himself right now.
Yeah, that qualifying offer, it's like, hey, we want to offer you, was it $17.5 million, I think was the qualifying offer?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I can get better than that. It's like, okay.
Yeah, you took about a third of that.
And coming off of one of his, and I understand.
Coming off a career year.
Yes. I mean, it was, I think we're all surprised at how low the market was. The overall market
I think trades played a lot into that, because when the offseason started, you thought the Giants would be in play. You thought there would be other teams in play for Moustakas, and then one by one,
I think the one that kills
pick up
him
a guy
was
in
the Red
trade.
Sox re-signing Nunez. I think if the Red Sox hadn't re-signed Eduardo Nunez, they would have gone after Moustakas.
I don't know, because of the development of Devers.
True.
I don't think the Red Sox were ever going to be in play for Moustakas after Devers came up last August. Nunez is going to be more of a float around the infield, fill in for Pedroia to start the year. I didn't really see him as a third base option for the Red Sox.
Well, obviously he is more there for the bat. Pedroia has a knee issue. I think what you have to hope from Nunez is he can fill in for you, hopefully a little bit behind Hanley at first.
Right.
And if you can get a guy on a decent contract who, kind of has a home in a certain location but can float around, it's helpful, obviously. But you mentioned a career year, one of 2 All-Star appearances for Moose. Hit 272 last year, second best average of his career. 314 on base, second best of his career. A 521 slugging, the best of his career, for an 835 OPS, again, the best of his career. 38 home runs, by far the best by a long shot, by 16.
And the Royals record.
Yes, drove in 85. I think the nice thing that you like here, granted, yeah, it's kind of a, it's a 1-for-3 ratio, but 33 dingers and only 94 strikeouts, and you walked 34 times. In this day and age,
only striking out 97 times is a pretty good number for a slugger.
You'll take that. 151 hits. He is 236 away from hitting the century mark, and he was too shy of hitting 600 plate appearances. So, I mean, this is great for the Royals.
And if Moustakas repeats last year, he's going to be another guy that could command top dollar. I mean, he'll be priced in behind Machado, but he'll be a guy that ends up being more sought after if he repeats last year.
I think he's traded. I mean, at this point, the Royals,
they're not going anywhere.
No. So let's go ahead and just mention this now, okay? So Jorge Bonifacio got an 80-game suspension today due to performance-enhancing substances. Basically, I mean, it's kind of helpful because that opens up the roster spot for Moustakas. GM Dayton Moore said, quote, and this was to Rustin Dodd of the Kansas City Star, quote, "This obviously is a very disappointing situation for the Royals, our fans, and Jorge. He is an incredible person who simply made a mistake. Jorge will have our full support as he deals with the consequences," end quote. Not a terrible hitter last year. Decent slash line. And the sad thing is, I mean, it was his opening. It was his rookie season.
It was the rookie year.
Yeah, comes in.
But he's
24
also
years old.
Right. So it's going to hurt his development, missing half a year. It hurts the Royals because he was going to
strikeouts. Is probably
that's not going to help his development either. But at the same time, he was to be one of their quote unquote better hitters this year. So
yeah, and I mean, and you're looking at this. He had 98 total hits, and 33 of those were extra base hits. 15 doubles, a triple, and 17 round trippers. Drove in 40, hit 255 with a 752 OPS. Certainly flashes of brilliance. I think the Royals see something that they want to build around. 80 games, and we'll see. That's rough. Royals signed John Jay. Will help in the outfield. That's what they were hoping he would have done. Jorge Soler. Man, did the Cubs not get the best end of that deal with the Wade Davis and Jorge Soler deal? But this brings us into the breakdowns of the American League Central. So I think, Tim, since we're already talking about them, let's start with the Royals. Finished third in the division last year. It wasn't a great year for them. Finished at 80-82, one game shy of 500, but obviously well below where they were 3 years ago when they were World Series champions. This opens a door for probably John Jay in the outfield, I think, full time. So talk to us. What do you see from this Royals team? Obviously, they're able to keep Salvador Perez. They get Moustakas. Lucas Duda got signed. To me, still, what used to make their name was that rotation. That has since disappeared.
It's now Danny Duffy and either a bunch of old veterans who are nothing to write home about, or you got a couple of young guys who, let's face it, weren't big name prospects to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, Ian Kennedy, Jason Hamill. There is nobody in that rotation that kind of just makes you go, ooh. Jason Vargas was the one last year who, we really had, really had a great first half of the year. It did not translate to the end of the year. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be...
It's basically Duffy and that's it.
Right. This is going to be a team who, at the end of it, I think, to me, if they're fortunate, they once again finish. I think, actually, I say fortunate. I think what Vargas gave them last year, granted he petered off there at the tail end, I don't foresee this team finishing with over 80 wins. I think between 70 and 75 is a fair, maybe even a little bit generous to the win.
And in my article my preview article, I had them at about 70.
Okay. And again, you can find those articles at View Mezzanine or go to thegruelingtruth.net. You can find all of Tim's articles there, and they will also be on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field with Graham and Chris on Facebook. Of course, you can also find all of our shows and Tim's stuff retweeted as well at OO Left Field on Twitter. So Moustakas comes back. Great for not nostalgic purposes. I think it's a little bit of a different way to put it, but great for them. He's a placeholder for now. He doesn't have a long-term place in that ball club, unfortunately. It's just kind of the way that things go. I don't see it making sense. The Detroit Tigers, with a new skipper in Ron Gardenhire, they are in absolutely, undeniably, unequivocally, no questions asked, rebuild mode.
Right, and the veterans that they have are old and looking like they're breaking down fast.
Victor Martinez, James McCann, a young catcher, but again, as we mentioned, he's getting long in the tooth for a catcher. Miggy doesn't have much time left. Okay, he was a once-in-a-generation hitter. Unfortunately, that generation, it's coming to an end. Candelario, Castellanos backs up at third base. You have Iglesias. Iglesias probably, one of the guys that might make you the most excited. 28, good, solid shortstop. Should be the one that kind of at least makes you go, okay, maybe we have something here. Career 270 hitter. We've seen what he can do in Boston. But I think what scares
and honestly, Iglesias is a glove first player anyway. Always has been.
Right. I think what scares you here is that they signed Mike Fiers, who, more credit to him, has decided to go vegan to stay healthy. Man, you really must care.
That worked well for Prince Fielder.
There you go. Jordan Zimmerman, who is ancient, feels ancient. He's 31 years old. Feels like he's been in the league forever. Been in since 2009.
And his numbers have been going down.
Yes, gradually.
And last year was gruesome.
So 6.08 ERA and 160 innings pitched. The year before had only pitched 105 innings. Was 8-13 last year. Gave up, and here's one that'll scare you: 108 earned runs. Think about 108 earned runs, 29 long balls, walked 44, struck out 103. One of the lowest in his lowest totals in his career. So, Zim.
And if you're giving up more runs than players you're striking out, you're not having a good year.
Right. I think what has to worry you here is that former Rookie of the Year Michael Fulmer. He's 24. We're thinking, man, this is it. He's going to be that guy. Wins Rookie of the Year in 2016. There was absolutely no reason he shouldn't have. And then 2017 comes around, goes 10-12. A 3.83 ERA. ERA jumped up significantly. Only pitched about 5 more innings than he did. 13 homers, 70 earned runs, walked 40. Struck out 114. He just didn't look right last year. I don't know what it was. Never heard anything about injury, but Fulmer never looked right last year.
Right, and I think it might have been a case where the hitters caught up to his tape and figured him out. So now it's time for him to react.
So if you're Fulmer, and I know that you've looked over this team, what does he do? Because he is a fastball pitcher, and where Justin Verlander, when he just kept throwing harder. Fulmer is no Verlander.
No.
So what does Fulmer do?
He needs to develop an off-speed pitch. If he's gonna be successful as a starter, he needs a good off-speed pitch. I haven't seen it yet.
I think at the end of this, and Chris will weigh in next week. 64-98 is where the Tigers finished this year. I don't see that changing. I see it probably going further down. They were the worst team in the American League last year. That is, unfortunately, probably going to stay that way. 60 wins, probably what they're looking at. I don't think that they will get to 64. We've seen a lot of pieces go. Nothing has really come back. It'll be a young team, hopefully a young team with a lot of talent, like the one we're going to discuss next. I don't have the Tigers getting to 64 wins. Tim, what do you have?
I don't even have them getting to 60.
Okay.
I've got them finishing last in the Central.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say probably the number one pick, but you've got Miami who'll probably be there, and Tampa will probably be ahead of them. But you're probably looking at a top 3 pick again in the draft next year.
Agreed. Now, a team that we mentioned that is young, but I think we're going to see something different from is the White Sox. White Sox last year finished 67-95. Not much better than the Tigers, but what we began to see is guys like Yoan Moncada finally have a chance to get in there. They get Wellington Castillo behind the plate. They have some youth on that team. Again, nothing really there in the ways of rotational help they need. James Shields is right now the number 1. He's 36. He hasn't done a damn thing since going to San Diego. It's been awful. We've just seen that ERA inflate. So, I don't know if the White Sox are really going to go beyond 67 wins, Tim. But I think even if they stand pat and they push, it's going to look a lot better. And if you're a White Sox fan, I think you have something to be excited for the next couple of years.
Yeah, they've got a lot of guys coming up the pipeline that could be up later this year. You're going to have Michael Kopech coming up for their rotation later this year.
And that kid has got a cannon.
Oh, I love that fastball is going to play no matter where he pitches. He may end up being their number 1 in 2 years.
Yeah, I remember watching him in the Arizona Fall League, and he was going to kind of be the second coming of Syndergaard. Had that long, shaggy blonde hair, which he since cut, which kind of made me sad, but thankfully didn't affect the power. The White Sox did fantastic in what they got back for Eaton, for Sale. The Marlins could learn something from the way that this team got dismantled. And let's not make any bones about it. They got dismantled, but they had to.
Right.
They weren't going to be anything productive where they were, but they at least used what they had to set themselves up for a long-term run, which I think they've done, like you mentioned, and it puts them down the line very, very well.
And they got great talent in those trades.
Agreed.
They got Moncada and Kopech from Boston. Their left fielder, Nicky Delmonico, was part of one of those trades. They landed some quality players back. Lucas Giolito was in the Eaton trade.
Right. So that brings us to Minnesota. We mentioned them. Lance Lynn, Jake Odorizzi had the first wild card last year. You mentioned Irvin Santana. Joe Mauer, long in the tooth. He is obviously, I think, on his last leg. He is there. He's the hometown boy. You picked up Logan Morrison from the Rays, and I love the signing of Morrison. He will most likely be your DH. You got Byron Buxton in center. You have Dozier at second. Unsure if Dozier's going to be re-signed. That is a big question mark. And, of course, Miguel Sano at third. The only thing that makes me scratch my head, why in the hell would you put Fernando Rodney as a closer, man?
Ugh. Give it to Reed. Give it to Addison Reed. Although if you're going to, they're both guys who in the closer role, I don't know.
I love it.
Go get Greg Holland. He's still available.
Right. End of the day, 85-77. With Lance Lynn and Odorizzi, if they, and Odorizzi, I'm still concerned. We talk with Dwayne Stats, the voice of the Rays. Odorizzi is this glorified, glamorous name, but the numbers don't match up with the glory. You know what I'm saying?
No, it's the name that you see on the marquee, but when you go to watch the play, it disappoints.
It's like saying, "Oh man, Keanu Reeves is going to be in the movie." Oh, damn, Keanu Reeves is going to be in this movie. Like that's what I mean.
And then the movie falls flat. Right.
Like, oh, okay. It's the same thing we've seen in every other movie. So I hope he turns it around differently. 85 wins this past year for the Twinkies. I'm going to go on a limb here. I'm going to put him at 90. I think I might be overshooting by a couple, but I think between 85 and 90 is a safe spot for them again this year. I don't see him going that much higher.
Right, and I probably would have them around 87, 88.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range.
Now the beauty of this is we haven't discussed these numbers, so I mean we're just in kind of in sync, which is awesome.
Right, and I hadn't done my review on the Twins yet, so right. I'm just looking based on the cuff of looking at what they've got on their depth chart, and the rest of the division. They're going to get a lot of wins just based on beating up on the Royals, White Sox, and Tigers all year.
Right, and that brings us into the divisional champs last year, a team that left much to be desired in the postseason last year. The Cleveland Indians, one of 3 100-win teams, 102 wins last year. The top team in the American League last year at 102-60. Some losses, some gains. That they grabbed. Actually, you know what? Before we get into this, why don't you guys listen to what Terry Francona has to say about this coming up season? I had a chance to talk with him a month or so ago, and he kind of gave what he thinks you can expect from his ball club this year. Have a listen.
You make a good point about some of the teams in the American League adding really good players. But that doesn't really affect how we go about our business. Our job or our goal is the same every year. We want to try to win a World Series. That's really hard to do. And we're in a market that we need to understand. We're not in New York's market, so we need to go about it sometimes in different ways. I don't think that's wrong to say that. It's not an excuse. So you try to make good decisions. We lost Carlos Santana that we loved. Kind of priced himself out of maybe our market, but we picked up Yonder Alonso that we think can pick up some of that offense. We try to use our 25-man roster to the best advantage we can. And, we're a team that's coming off 102 wins. So I think we still feel pretty good about things.
And Tim, I think that's the big thing. Yes, you lose Santana. He outpriced himself, but then again, he ends up outpricing himself to the Phillies, which, granted,
that was a signing that sort of caught me off guard.
Yes, it's not the same length and weight as what the Nationals signing Jason Worth away years ago from the Phillies was. But I'm like, you got a chance to be, on a perennial World Series contender, and you're going to go to the worst team in the NL East and one of the worst teams in baseball. I get that, you and I both said we think that the Phillies have a chance to make some waves, but hell, I don't think that a 3-year contract for Santana has him there long enough to really get to be a part of when those waves begin to get made.
Right. And it just, it boggles my mind. It boggled my mind that Philadelphia signed him to begin with. I didn't have him anywhere near Philly in the offseason.
Right. I knew the landing spot. I honestly thought that would be a guy that the Indians would shoot for. I'm sure they did. It just didn't work out.
Right.
You keep Lindor. You keep Kipnis. Kipnis is going to play second base. Something that Tito talked to him about. Said, "Yep, we're going to keep you at second." There was talk of moving him to the outfield. Michael Brantley needs to stay healthy. Period. He has to stay healthy. You have Chisenhall, Brandon Geyer's out there as well, and of course you get Yonder, like you said. Encarnacion is still there. You have Yan Gomes. I think the catcher spot is kind of a question mark. I will tell you this though, and you mentioned it earlier. If he's available and he's having a good year, this time I bet you Lucroy will go to Cleveland, even though he spurned him 2 years ago. If they want him and they make a move, I bet you he says yes.
I think at this point he doesn't have the choice because I don't think his new contract has a no trade in it. So
true, and that's even with his. I'm not sure. Even with his seniority as far as being a veteran, I don't know.
He doesn't have the 10-5 because it's a 1-year deal in Oakland. So If the A's want to move him to Cleveland, he'll go to Cleveland.
Now, something that I've talked with Chris about before, and I brought it up to you a little bit, and I want to play this clip for you guys. I love Terry Francona. Great manager, kind of like Joe Madden, a guy who, about having the pulse of your team, this guy knows what his team needs. He knows what makes them the best, when to kind of tighten the screws, when to back off. So I asked him. The one thing I've always wanted to ask him was, basically, how do you know when to let them be loose and have fun like we've seen in the playoffs, and how to keep it tight? Have a listen to this, and we'll talk about it here in just a second.
Well, you know what? One, it's trust. And two, you're trying to find a balance where I feel that guys play better, when they're loose, when they're playing baseball. Now, there's a fine line. You don't want to be silly and not taking care of what you're supposed to out there. But when the guys show up and they understand that their job is to beat that team across the field, let them have some fun and be in themselves. As long as they believe, I think they're better players that way.
So, I can't say enough. I love it. I love what Francona brings to that ball club. You've had a chance to hear it as well, Tim. You heard along with us. I mean, what do you say about a guy? I mean, he's
the perfect manager for that ball club. I loved him in Boston. I was very disappointed when they let him go in 2011. Arguably the best manager in baseball. Right up there with Joe Madden.
Yeah.
Right up there with Joe Madden.
I think along with, and I know Chris would always say Bochy, even though he's a Giants homer. I agree. I love Bochy, but I agree with you. I think the way that these guys, they get behind their players, Madden is notorious for calling a team practice and it being a zoo, a petting zoo for families. Hey, bring all your players, bring your families, bring your wives, bring the kids. We're gonna have a family day. They have remember all the goofy dress up days he did in Tampa. When we saw Zobrist, Zobrist wanted to go back. He won a World Series in Kansas City. He's like, I want to go with Joe. He went back to Chicago, and that worked out for him. He won 2 rings, I think, back to back. But yeah, I agree, man. I mean, he's a fantastic manager. We saw him take a ball club that I won't say it was a laughing stock, but goes to an area, that they always seem to be so close and yet so far away. Andrew Miller's a great piece. I hope that he does better this year. They need him to do better this year. But I'm going to push this. I'm going to put the Indians again. I think 102 wins is a great spot for them. Anything beyond 102 wins is just, okay, it's a little bit overkill, I think. I mean, if you project more than 102 wins on any ball club, even in the Cubs World Series winning
year, shooting for the moon.
Yeah, I'm going to push it 102. I don't think there's any question that they repeat as divisional champions. Disagree with me? I doubt you do, but do you?
I don't. I don't have them at 102. I mean, I do see some regression because they did lose Jay Bruce. I think Santana's bat played a lot better than Alonso's bat is going to. I do think he was a good signing for them, but he's not Santana.
Are you going to go below 3-digit wins? Below the century mark?
Very slightly. I've got them around 97.
Okay.
Very slightly.
So you've got the Twinkies at 87. So a 10-game lead for the Indians to finish the year at what will be 97 and 65.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's okay. I mean, I think it's when you go plus or minus 5, that's right about what you can expect with the ups and downs of baseball. So there you have it, guys. Our breakdowns of the American League Central. So much again. We want to thank Timothy Farmer for jumping in with us, filling in for Chris this week. You see what happens when you have someone who understands. They don't argue. They don't fight with you. They don't argue with you. They just agree with the genius. And that is why Tim Farmer is going to be one of my favorite guest co-hosts. I appreciate you, Tim, for hanging out with us today. Thanks for giving us some time. Be sure, guys, to check out his Twitter page at ViewMezzanine. Go to thegruelingtruth.net. All right, everything coming up with March Madness, the NFL draft. They're doing their mocks, McShay and all those guys, and the big guys are doing their mocks. Check out our stuff. Also, be sure to check out the show page, Out of Left Field, with Chris and Graham on Facebook. Give it a like and follow us on Twitter at OO Left Field. For everybody here at The Grueling Truth, for Chris, who couldn't be here, for Tim, I'm Graham. Guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week on Out of Left Field.